Either way, I think it's going to be really positive.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right on, man. Okay, well, I'll open this up and we're off to the races.
All right.
All right. Hey, gentlemen, welcome. Hey, Sam. Hey, Ryan. Hey, Chris. I see Regan there. I think I saw Troy for a moment. Hey, guys, great to have you here. Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Jacob Jodwin. I'm a certified men's coach and a mindset mentor. And I'm super excited to be here with you guys today. And I'm particularly excited to have Jacob here today. Welcome, Jacob Scholze.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, Jacob Scholze, am I pronouncing
Scholze. Yep. Yep. You're
Scholze?
close.
Yeah.
Yep. That's Scholze.
Is the host of an Instagram page called feel underscore sober underscore good. And he's super inspiring. He's using that as a platform to share his story and to inspire others to live a sober life. And I'm super excited to have you here. Really looking forward to the opportunity to connect with you. I've been a follower of yours for a while, and I think you and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, and in many ways have kind of similar experiences and have taken a similar path. And so, just a little bit of a housekeeping before we get started here, guys. Um, just to be fully transparent here, I'm a men's coach and I'm not a certified addictions counselor. Okay, I'm not trained in addictions counseling. I'm also not here to suggest that everybody needs to go sober. Okay. I find that this is one of those things that I have personal experience in. And I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to share some of my experience, what's worked for me, and in no way, shape, or form am I here to either judge, criticize, or condemn others. All right. I'm hoping that this will just be a real open, honest, and possibly raw conversation where Jacob and I can share kind of our experiences and share what's worked for us. I'll also mention that if you guys have any questions or any comments, feel free to either pop it in the chat or raise your little emoji hand sort of thing, and we'll get to you as soon as we can sort of thing, because I'd certainly love to hear either your guys' experiences or what's resonating with you. Sound cool? Right on, guys. And last but not least, my hope is that we can use this as an opportunity to be honest, but simultaneously respectful. And so if there's something that you don't necessarily agree with, that's okay. But, just ensure that, I've asked Jacob to join us here today, and some of the topics that we're going to be discussing are likely to be sensitive, and just ask that you guys, maintain, a level of respect for both him, myself, and others who are in attendance. That's fair, hey? Right on. Well,
Absolutely.
again, thanks so much for being here, Jacob. It's a pleasure to have you here. I've been really looking forward to connecting with you. I've followed what you're doing on Instagram for a little while, and you're super inspiring, and I really resonate with a lot of your stories. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me, and I want to echo what you said there about sobriety. I come from a non-judgmental source because I was always someone who never could imagine not drinking alcohol. I didn't know why people wouldn't want to drink alcohol. Um, but now I've seen a different side of it, and there's a way I got to this point, but I definitely understand the appeal of alcohol. I understand why people do drink, and I've seen so many benefits that I feel compelled to share, and that's what my page is about.
Yeah, totally, man. Well, throughout this process, I'm hoping that we'll hit a little bit of the highs and the lows and the whole gambit of substance use and abuse. And maybe we'll start off with just kind of out of curiosity asking you, what initially, appealed to you about drinking alcohol, or what was the attraction for you?
Well, just as a teenager, it looked like something fun to do, I mean, and a lot of times that was seemed cool and that sort of thing. So you just kind of had fun drinking with your buddies or whatever, just to have fun, loosen up a little bit. Um, just the usual. I didn't really have like a major problem at initially, really. Over years, I built up tolerance for alcohol. Um, and I was kind of thinking about this a little bit, and I remember back when I had a Bloody Mary in the morning and I had that day buzz going, and I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. This is good. This feels good, and at the time, that's what it felt like. And so it kind of, you started to want crave that a little bit more, and so you start looking for more excuses to drink earlier in the day. And and as often as possible sometimes, and then as you get older, family life. I have 3 kids, um, hectic work schedule, um, and so then you start using it to manage stress, anxiety, that sort of thing. You think it's helping, um, find out it really is actually making it worse. Um, and then it was, and so that was kind of initially what led me to alcohol, and then it kind of went spiraled out a little bit out of control after COVID, because that's when you're stuck at home and you didn't have a lot else to do. And so when you were looking for excuses to kind of just relax and distress, it was an easy go-to.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to what you're saying there, even about just the initial appeal of it. And I don't know about you, but like, growing up, I was, kind of a nerdy kid. And I had this like center part, and which I think is I see is coming kind of back in style a little bit with the hockey hair and the mullet and stuff like that. But I had this center part and I had these glasses, and I wasn't a very popular kid growing up. And when I hit high school, I got rid of the glasses. I got contact lenses, and suddenly found myself being invited to parties. And at these parties, there was alcohol involved, and some cases weed, and later it became cocaine and stuff like that too. But I found, man, when I drank, I found like I was almost like had an instant social life now. And I was accepted, and I had friends, and I was seen as kind of one of the cool kids when I was out partying and drinking and so on and so forth. And I love that kind of feeling of, kind of, the camaraderie or the friendship, and never mind the kind of like the, seemingly endless confidence and energy that it gave you at the start. And that was a real appeal for me, and something that, for me anyway, personally, was kind of short-lived. Or, the benefits started to become outweighed by the compounding problems that it created later in life. And I'm sure we'll get to that, but it's tricky because, alcohol tends to kind of lure you in with this promise of like, whatever it is, whether it's acceptance or friends or confidence or energy or, being cool and in club. And, then at some point along the line, it kind of turns its back on you, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how it's a slow process, and that's one of the things that I think is important to recognize is there is a stereotype or a stigma around the fact that an alcoholic or someone that's alcohol has a problem with alcohol, they are you know living on the street in a brown bag, or um, are they're but really what it can be is it can slowly creep up on you, and it can happen to anyone. Is what I is my personal opinion. I know there's different opinions on that, but I think it can happen to anyone, because it wasn't like it was like instantly I was addicted to it. It
Right.
was a slow process. It was years, and then it became where it was like a point where you didn't really want it to be.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I find that too, it's glorified so much in the media and in movies and TV shows and things like that. Like it's really seen as something that, is a real positive. And it's not only is it normalized in society, but I think in many cases it's almost encouraged.
Mhm.
And growing up, I remember very distinctly like looking at Tom Cruise and Cocktail was like an
Ah,
idol of mine. And I'm an 80s kid. And so growing up on Top Gun and, things like that, I love that kind of stuff. But there was that one movie in particular, Cocktail, where he's like behind the bar and he's slinging drinks and tossing the bottle. And man, I wanted to be that guy so bad. And I actually got into the hospitality industry and was a bartender for a long time. And, that lifestyle was really kind of conducive to drugs and alcohol. And in many cases, we were kind of encouraged to drink and to do shots with customers and things like that because it built rapport. And, so you're right. Like on the one hand, it can be really glorified and a bit of a, positive aspect to social life and a bit of a social lubricant. But it starts slow, doesn't it? And it becomes kind of a slippery slope. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, when did you first start to realize that, maybe there were some negative side effects or some a downside to drinking? When did you start to realize that it was a problem?
Well, it was probably after COVID, that that just really sticks out to me because that's when it kind of started getting a lot worse, where I kind of lost interest in other things. So I mean, really,
Mm.
all I wanted to do was get home from work and have a drink. I'd come up with excuses. Oh, it was a stressful day, or I need this is my reward for the end of the day, type of thing. But it started to get where you don't even really enjoy it anymore. Like you just have to have it, and you're not enjoying it, and you kind of know that you need to stop or something needs to give here, but you're like unsure how to do that. And that was a problem for me, was just admitting that I had a problem
Right.
because I didn't know what people would think. I didn't know how I could stop. A lot of my friends group, a majority of people like to drink, so you're always around it. So it's always like in a social setting, it's like, I'll have maybe I should quit, but it's just so prevalent everywhere, so it's just easy to get. And um and so the when I started to hide it a little bit more, that's when I knew that I kind of had a problem, obviously. But I didn't know what to do about it. I wasn't sure how to stop, or um and that's kind of been my mission with being more open about this,
Right.
um with my page, and just in general. I'm being more open about it because it what I'm finding is there's a lot of people that are struggling with it privately. It seems like it's something that we can struggle with it privately. We don't know if we have a problem. We know we have a problem, but we don't know what to do. And so I found, by being open about it, I've been amazed at how many people have reached out, and and looking for some help, or just have a similar struggle. And so I kind of wished I had that when I was going through what I was going through. Someone I could go to, um, where I knew they wouldn't judge me for it, or maybe kind of help me get on the right track of what I needed to do, because you're not really thinking very clearly at that time.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jacob and I were just speaking right before everybody joined us, and I was just saying that, even having the opportunity to have conversations like this does a couple of things for me. One, I find that the more that I'm open about my challenges with substance use and abuse, the more I find that people tend to resonate with that challenge and have a lot of either things in common or have experienced similar things as it relates to that. And two, I find that the more open and honest I am about my challenges with it, it's very kind of like therapeutic or cathartic for myself. and it allows me to kind of process that and, kind of share some of the tools that I've learned along the way, and maybe even shed a little bit of light on either where I was 5, 6 years ago, or beyond, and that sort of thing, to help, somebody else who's maybe going through some of the same things. But I always say that, like, my history with drugs and alcohol is like colorful and complicated. I started drinking way back in high school, and I had all kinds of run-ins and multiple vehicle accidents where I was hospitalized. I was the passenger in both, so I wasn't at the wheel, okay, but I was arrested, drug possession. I was in all kinds of fights. I got fired from my job. I was fighting with my girlfriend, my parents, and things like that, and vehicle accidents, and so on and so forth. But it's really interesting what addiction and what our mind will do. And I always could point to something else. It was always somebody else's problem or somebody else's fault, or I just got unlucky. And I never did the thought even cross my mind for the longest time that maybe alcohol has something to do with this.
Hmm.
But now looking back, I realized that, man, alcohol in many of those cases was like the common denominator,
Yeah.
and now I realize that, a lot of times that was kind of contributing to a lot of the challenges that I was facing. And, like you said, I think even just admitting to ourselves that, hey, maybe that is a problem, or maybe that's something that's worth looking at, can be the first step. And yeah, I don't know about you, but like I tried different, sobriety challenges. I did like sober October and dry January. And it's funny though, because I would get to the end of that 30 days. Man, I felt so great. I was sleeping better. I was feeling better. I was more positive. I had more energy. My skin looked better. I was working out more. I was, looking better. Um, and then to celebrate the end of the 30 days, I was always like, well, let's go pop some tops. And now I
Right.
think back and I'm like, man, if I was feeling so good, like, why would I ever go back to something that robbed me of my health and my vitality, my energy, my confidence, and things like that? But again, looking back, hindsight's always 2020. And out of curiosity, have you ever tried, things like that where you either, gave it up for a short while or?
Yeah, I didn't do any of the like the long term um, breaks. I did try to um, you know say, okay, I'm not going to drink only on the weekend, or or I'll wait till Friday or something like that. But it always failed miserably. When I try to moderate, it never, it just didn't work for me. Some people, they can moderate really well, and so that's why, there's different aspects of this. There's some that maybe can moderate well, but they're looking to try to get that next level of performance. Some, like you're talking about, some of the results in the gym, some of the positive benefits they can get just by eliminating it, period, out of their life, even if they don't have a problem. And then there's those that can't moderate it, and really need to you know take it seriously, because it can get real serious pretty quick.
Right. Yeah. Well, oftentimes when I'll do those little stints, give up alcohol for a short period of time, whether it was a month, or I think the longest I did was when my wife was pregnant with our first son. I went about 6 months without drinking. And I think I justified it to myself and said, see, I don't have a problem. I don't need to give this up. And, but when I broke the my sobriety streak that time, it was because of my brother's wedding, and I had some drinks at the wedding. And kind of to your point there, I started then, well, I'll just have a drink tonight for the wedding. And then it was, well, the next night we're gonna have some wine with dinner. And then it was like, well, we're going for appetizers. It's like it's almost dinner. And then, we can rationalize and justify things. And before I knew it, I was kind of right back where I started again. And the drinking and the consumption was up, where I had left off. And, you do that a few times and it starts to compound, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have a really powerful story, and I'm curious if you'd be willing to share, kind of at
Yep.
what point you realized that, hey man, we're not fooling around anymore. This is getting real serious.
Yeah, that was March 9th of last year. But there was signs coming up to that point where I was having certain symptoms, and so, but basically it ended up quickly sum it up. I was in the ER fighting for my life, basically. Um, and so this is where I think it's important to share as well because I almost lost my life because of this, and you know, it sneaks up on you, and everything can seem fine, and then like if you have a problem and you aren't addressing it, I was out a few days before. I was in the hospital at a work function where we were having a meal and drinks and dinner. Wasn't feeling the greatest, but little did I know my life was about to change drastically. So once there's certain symptoms that start to creep up. Like I was starting to get real stiff and sore in my legs at night. It would wake me up at night, and really that was a symptom of my of a liver issue that I even went to the doctor for, and they didn't really look at that as an issue, but that's probably because I wasn't real open about the fact that I was had a problem. So there is that, but it can sneak up on you, and basically what it turned out to me for me it was liver cirrhosis, and it got real serious real quick, and so I was basically at a point where they were like, you have 3 to 6 months if you don't get a liver transplant. And so you talk about, you got a family at home, and you think at that point it's pretty devastating, thinking I had what have I done to myself. Um, and even at that point, I wasn't quite willing. I was kind of like not wanting to admit that I had a problem with drinking. I just wanted to downplay it a little bit, and but that's not going to help anyone if I downplay it. It's important to be open because a lot of people, someone will ask, "Well, how much were you drinking?" And a lot of times that's not just because they're not judging you; they're kind of gauging where they're at compared to where
Right.
where you're at,
Right.
because
Good
they
point.
see how serious it can get. And so for me, that was when I knew we've got a problem. Um, Amazingly, though, as I was recovering, which I fortunately found um, help through functional medicine and some natural ways, and I'm doing I'm it's almost a miracle right now. If you saw where I was about a year ago, um, but even at that point, I was still kind of thinking, well, could I have a drink again? Like could I have wine with my wife at dinner? You know, you it's hard to even imagine now when I think about it. Like, why am I even was I even thinking that? Because you're so used to having it that you think life's going to be like, is this a life sentence now? Like, this is going to be really boring and terrible. But it's been completely the opposite. And for me, it took about 6 months, 7 months when I all of a sudden realized, man, I'm starting to see so many benefits. Why would I ever go back to alcohol? Even and at this point, I could. I've been told I could have it in moderation if I was very careful, but I'm not. At this point, it's not worth it to risk it, and I've seen way too many benefits. I'm loving this side of the sobriety.
And that's really interesting because I oftentimes get asked that same question, or that people will say, like, "Oh, you don't drink? Man, that must be so hard." And I think, no, honestly, that's the easiest thing for me is because, like, man, now the energy, the attitude, all of the different aspects of my life that have improved as a result of my sobriety, it's not a matter of discipline. It's not a matter of willpower. It's like, I don't even want that anymore. It's like, I don't even want to revisit that. I know where that path took me. And it's like the path that I'm on right now is so much more rewarding and just feels so much better that it doesn't really require much in the way of self-control or discipline, so to speak. But yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
quick question for you, Jacob. You're talking
Mhm.
about kind of that scare that you had. Obviously, I mean, that ending up in the ER and realizing or being told that you have cirrhosis of the liver would be shocking, to say the least. But I'm curious, were there either symptoms or indications to you, either behaviorally or physical symptoms that you were experiencing that would have led you to believe that this was getting more serious more quickly?
Yeah, there was when you start getting, I guess things that you start to look for is, you get real stiff and sore, your nerves, it affects your nerves, alcohol does. And then also, um, I started getting some fluids and that sort of thing building up my stomach, and it just looked like I had this big beer belly. But really, what it was slowly was there was this these fluids that were building up that were basically because my liver was not functioning like it should be, and and then of course along with that you have a lot of weight. I had a lot of weight loss, a lot of pain, and then also um, uh, started the jaundice.
Right.
Getting yellow eyes and skin. Um, I couldn't. I was like in a wheelchair, trying to get around, because I was in so much discomfort and pain and so weak. I lost all my muscle, and yeah, it didn't look good. Most people now, when they've seen me, the ones that saw me, because I stayed, I kind of kept myself. I was a little bit of a hermit or whatever. I just stayed. I was self conscious about how I looked. In that circumstance, so I kind of just stayed home. And but those that had visited me or saw me when I was sick, most of them, they wouldn't tell me it then, but they'll tell me now. It didn't look good. They they didn't they didn't they were real worried about me, and it didn't look like I was going to make it. And so it's but I've worked really hard to straighten things out, and I've gotten my strength back, and just there's been so many benefits with the sobriety, that that's a big part of if you're going to recover from that. You know not drinking is a key element.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen some pictures on your Instagram page of the yellow skin and the jaundice and that sort of thing. And I mean, that's scary to say the least. And just while I think of it, guys, if you guys don't follow Jacob on Instagram, and you're at all either sober curious or you're interested in kind of, what I would call normalizing sobriety and hearing from other people who have kind of either shared experiences or have taken the path to sobriety, give him a follow because he's constantly sharing inspiring and motivating stuff. Real positive guy. So check him out on Instagram too. But
thank you.
yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about some of the health scares and things like that, I mean, I've talked to a couple of people who are even in attendance here today, and we've had similar experiences where I remember very distinctly two episodes where I ended up in the ER. One case in particular where my heart rate was through the roof and I could feel my elevated blood pressure. And simple tasks like walking up and down a flight of stairs, I was winded, I was out of breath. And at the time, this sounds really bad, you guys, but this is honest. I owned and operated a wellness center and I was, working full time as a personal trainer, and it was part of that stress and part of that overwhelm and that anxiety that contributed to my drinking. And but in a lot of ways, I felt kind of like this Jekyll and Hyde. lifestyle. Whereas like during the day, I was, wellness oriented, fitness minded, and that sort of thing. And then in the evening and on the weekends, I had this compulsion to drink. But
Hmm.
for me to be out of breath was really unusual and abnormal. And I remember very distinctly calling my wife on the phone and being like, I don't know what's happening here, but like, I think I need to go to the hospital. Can you come pick me up? And she brought me to the ER and explained to the doctor kind of what was going on. And again, Jacob, to your point there, I was less than forthcoming about my drinking. And he
Hmm.
asked me about some of those things. And obviously, there's some embarrassment there and some shame that I had wrapped up in that. And so I didn't really want to be fully honest about it. And kind of got hooked up to all of those like electrodes and did the heart scan and everything, like blood tests and things like that. And test results came back and they said, well, nothing really here to indicate, other than, maybe it's stress or, that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, well, I'm off the hook this time. And so it was real quick that I went back to my drinking again.
Yep. Yep.
But then there was another instance too where I felt like this pain in my side. And it was this dull ache that just wouldn't go away no matter what I did. And again, I started to have fears of, oh man, what kind of lasting damage have I done here? Is this my liver? Or, like, am I creating something that I can't undo? And so again, I went to the ER and had that checked out. And again, all kind of test results came back normal. And so for me, I knew there was a part of me that knew, my conscience knew that, man, this drinking, it's starting to go sideways on you.
Hmm.
But again, I rationalized it, or it was, I got the green light from the doctor that, hey, everything's good. You're clear. And so I went back to that habit and back to that behavior again. And, it wasn't until things really started to get dark and here and started to lead to some real challenges in my personal life that I really had to kind of reconsider some things. But it's so interesting how we can kind of, I don't want to say like play these games with ourselves, but I know I really tried to kind of find this like perfect balance of like, well, just moderation. And I was kind of like a chemist in some cases where, I'd smoke a little weed and it would bring me down. So I'd have a few drinks to bring me back up. And, I was doing cocaine at some point and, trying to find that like perfect balance, and I found that for me, more often than, well, sometimes I could get away with it. Sometimes I could find that moderation and that'd be okay. But more often than not, I was losing control and over consuming, and then I'd pay for it for, days afterwards. And I
Hmm.
found for me that complete abstinence is just way easier than trying to find that perfect balance. You know what I mean? It seems like a moving target at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the thing about it. And then when you learn more about alcohol, like I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize how deadly it could be. I mean, you kind of think you're invincible and it's not going to affect you like that, or like that's down the road. And here I am, 39, and at the time 38, dealing with this. I mean, I'm way too young for this, and it's become from what I've seen with learning more about it, is it's becoming more of a problem with younger individuals, because of not just alcohol. Alcohol is probably one of the biggest factors for liver issues, but you know, the sugars and the processed foods and all that other stuff too, fatty liver and that sort of thing. That's kind of where it starts. And then it can go to worse, especially when you add alcohol into it.
Sure, yeah, but you're right. That's probably compounding effects there with lifestyle choices, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So was that the turning point for you in your sobriety? Was the hospital visit and finding out that you had cirrhosis of the liver?
Yeah, that was the turning point for me, as far as, obviously, it was rock bottom. I mean, we talk about, some people have to hit it, some people don't. Some people, their rock bottom looks different for each individual of what they classify that as. Some people just decide to eliminate alcohol because they see it's not serving them well anymore.
Right.
Maybe they're trying to make gains in the gym. They're athletes. A lot of athletes are getting away from alcohol because it's giving them an edge because they actually are performing better without it. Um, and so for me, it was a turning point because it was at that about 7 months, and I just remember, like, I think that was about the time when I was finally well enough to start going back to work, and I could just feel so much more clear-minded. I could handle. I used to drink because I was stressed or had anxiety, but I've been away from it for so long. Now it's almost like my anxiety just like vanished, and I can handle the stress. Like it doesn't phase me anymore. I feel like it gave me an edge, and I could just feel so clear-minded. Like when I was working on projects and stuff, I didn't have this distraction of like, oh, I can't wait till I get home and have a drink or something. I could focus on my work, and you start seeing those benefits. And then I needed to, like I had mentioned earlier, I lost all my muscles, so I was getting back in the gym. I had a personal trainer who helped me get started again, and that was about a year ago. I started working out with him again, got all my strength back, and I started seeing, because I had worked out before when I was drinking too, like you had mentioned in your case, but I wasn't really making the progress I wanted to make. But now I'm making the progress. I have the energy. I'm disciplined. I want to get healthy. I'm motivated to do that. Um, and one thing that really helped me if somebody's thinking about alcohol, like taking a break from alcohol, was the book This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. I had a good friend of mine that had chosen a sober lifestyle because alcohol wasn't serving them anymore, and they recommended that, and that book really was eye-opening as far as there's a lot of just the way she explains it. And it was like, I think she says in her book that some of her friends won't read it because they probably won't drink alcohol anymore if you read that book,
Interesting.
because you'll realize like how bad it is for you. I mean, it's a literal toxin poison type. One carcinogen causes 7 types of cancer. There's a lot of studies that she shares in that about alcohol and how they, and different. She breaks down a lot of different things about it, and that was kind of the turning point for me. It was like, I, I don't. Why would I want to put this in my body anymore? You know, and so reading books have helped, and it's for me that was the turning point. And I would say that if you can avoid that kind of rock bottom, by all means. Like if you feel like it's starting to get out of hand, take some action before you get to it, because it is scary to be thinking that when you're as young as you are and it's something that was preventable to a certain extent, um, it makes you have a new appreciation for life, I guess.
Totally.
So,
100%. Isn't it funny how, like, and oftentimes in many cases, I drank to manage the stress or to cope with the stress or to deal with anxiety and things like that. And it wasn't until after I removed that from the equation that I realized that in many cases, the alcohol was creating my stress and anxiety, not taking it away. And that was a huge kind of eye-opening moment for me. I never would have anticipated that. And I think growing up, I was always kind of taught that that was a part of like how you deal with problems. And it never even occurred to me that in some cases that might be contributing to the problems that I'm experiencing?
right. And it's funny that about one thing about that I've noticed is that's a big reason why a lot of people drink. From
Sure.
when I've talked to different ones, and I've educated myself so much on this topic. It's like it's a flip side of like I'm learning all the negatives of alcohol and all the benefits of not drinking it. Whereas I used to just kind of focus on drinking it and how it made me feel good and it helped me out. And so I didn't really pay attention to any, people who chose not to drink. I thought, man, they're really missing out. But there's a lot of people don't realize that it does make it worse,
Yeah,
and that's a big reason why people drink. And so that's really my page is about, is to try to create awareness on that, on certain things like that. Maybe it gets people to think, and the people who follow it, they follow it hopefully because they are um, trying to quit or trying to maintain sobriety or are curious about it, are inspired, want some hope. Maybe they're dealing with a liver. I have had a number of people who have liver issues reach out to me,
right,
wondering what I did to solve it, because they're not getting help, or they're not getting results in the hospitals and stuff like that, and so they're looking for any hope. I mean, yeah, when you're at that point, you're like, you hold on to any little bit of hope, because you're not getting a lot of hope from the hospitals. And it's not in their defense. I mean, you kind of caused this, and that's all they really are educated on. You're going to need a transplant, liver transplant. That's really your only option. That's what they're trained in. But there are alternatives. But it is it is a big factor of why a lot of people drink, is anxiety.
totally.
And when you ask them, well, but if people can just, if anything, just try to be aware of it, maybe they can adjust. So,
Yeah, yeah. And it's really interesting because, like, on the same hand, like, I was exercising all the time. I was, in my mind, doing all the right things, exercising, eating right, meditating, journaling. I was going to therapy, like, I was checking a lot of the boxes, as far as kind of self-care and as far as, kind of mindfulness and wellness and things like that. But at the same time, I had this drinking compulsion. And it was like, like you said, I was like driving around with the e-brake on. And rather than releasing the e-brake, I just thought, well, I'll just go harder, sort of thing. And, I kind of eventually hit what I would call my former rock bottom. And I think rock bottom probably looks a little bit different for everybody,
yeah.
but, I finally reached a point where I was like, I knew deep down inside that something had to change. And if something didn't change, like, something real bad was going to happen. And I was really blessed that I had a client at the time who was 20 years in the AA program. And every time I got to the opportunity to talk with her or visit with her, I kind of pick her brain and ask her questions. And I was really curious about it. And, it's in a real non-judgmental way. She kept inviting me and saying, oh, yeah, you should come by, just come check it out. And she set me up to go for coffee with another old timer and that sort of thing. And, they had some real good stories and stuff like that. And, um, eventually I did end up going to a meeting. And I got to the point where I found that, like I said, something had to change, and everything that I had tried up to that point wasn't working.
Hmm.
And so I might as well try something else. And, I remember very distinctly sitting in the parking lot there and thinking about, well, should I go in and trying to work up the courage? And, I think, and I don't know about you, but I had this like image in my mind, or this preconceived notion of people in AA. And like you talked about, alcoholics, that, they're bums or they're vagrants, so they're on the sidewalk or drinking out of a paper bag and stuff like that. And I thought, man, those aren't my people, and I'm not supposed to be here, and this isn't for me. I'm not an alcoholic. And but begrudgingly, I went into this AA meeting, and what I found was that actually the people who were there, they're all smiling and they're all joking around. They're all in a good mood. Many of them were well dressed. I later found out that so many of them were like business professionals from my hometown and that sort of thing, like well-to-do and articulate. They're smart, they're educated, and it blew my mind.
Hmm.
And I walked in there and I was grumpy and I was angry, I was depressed and, probably hungover. And I thought, what are you guys doing? You guys are all smiling and laughing. Don't you know where we are? Like, we're in the fucking basement of a church here at an AA meeting. Like, we're supposed to be grumpy. That was my attitude. That was my perception of it. And then
Yeah.
I came to realize that actually, maybe in some cases these people know something that I don't.
Hmm.
And that was a real eye opener. But it sounds to me like you found some resources that have been helpful for you too, huh?
Yeah, it's been, I think in hindsight now, I wish I would have went to like a rehab or something like you did rather than go through what I went through with my health. Because but the biggest you hit it right on the head there is that there's that pride factor and that shame, and it's like I don't want to, if what are people going to think if I go to rehab or something like that, and like and majority of people, like even to this day, like when I've tell them I've had an issue with alcohol, they'll you didn't really have a that big of a problem, did you? Because I hid it so well,
Yeah.
and so it would be like, and you try to, and I think a lot of, unfortunately, I think a lot of people do that because they are afraid of what people are going to think, but I think it's important that we get that message that it's okay to ask for help. Ask for help. Like you're not alone. Like going through this, and it helped me a lot when I was before I started my page, was just hearing other people's stories on Instagram and that sort of thing, because when when a lot of people can't, either aren't being open about it, you don't know that they have a problem, so then it's hard to really talk to someone about it. And then when you try to explain that what that addiction feels like, or what it feels like to have it, and you have somebody who moderates well and can't relate to that, just like, well, just cut back. Well, it's, you'd like it to be that easy, but it's not. And so it's helpful to go to something like what you went to, because you have people in that group that can relate to what you're going through, um, and so I did not have to do rehab because I basically was got the scare of death into me, and then also I educated myself. I reached out, and then and for me, using my pages is holds me accountable, and
Right.
keeps reminding me. It's like a way that I kind of just, if it helps somebody else, that's what I hope it does. But it really, it also helps me, remind me, like, do not want to go back. You don't want this, and so yeah, I didn't have to go to rehab, like, or AA, but I would, if you're at a point where you can't control it, then you got to do what's right. Do what's best for you, because you can straighten this out if you commit to it and you get the help and the resources that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that you hit it really well. And, looking back, I didn't realize this at the time, but there were a number of kind of like telltale signs that I was guilty of doing that were really indicative that it was becoming a problem for me. In particular, one I remember that like we'd go on road trips as a family and stuff like that, and we'd be staying in the cabin with another couple or friends and stuff. And I had my public alcohol. I'd bring
Yep.
like, wine and beer and it would go in the fridge, but I always kept like a bottle of vodka or tequila or something in my suitcase in our room. And I'd sneak away and go do shots and that sort of thing. And I felt like, wow, I mean, that's just for personal. I didn't want to share
Yeah.
it, and things like that. Or I found that, like I was even at home and that sort of thing, I have wine with the wife at dinner or while we're making dinner, or beers while we're barbecuing and stuff. But again, I was sneaking into the other room where I had bottles kind of, on the wine rack or on our liquor cabinet. And I'd take a swig of that or a shot just to kind of, keep that buzz going,
Yep.
was another one. And I don't know if any of you guys are wine drinkers, but I found myself buying boxes of wine
Yep.
for a couple of reasons. One is I found that, well, one, it was easier to hide how much I was consuming.
Yep.
because it's in a cardboard box, and so you can't really see like a bottle, it's only lasts so long, but a box goes a lot longer, and it was cheaper, and I wasn't going through them as quickly, and my garage was filling up with empty glass bottles pretty quick, and so it was another way to kind of hide that. But two other things that really jumped out at me too, as far as kind of hiding it, were I was going to different liquor stores
Yep.
around the
Yep.
city because I found that I knew the cashiers and they knew me, and I was kind of ashamed or a little bit embarrassed about that. And so I'd hit up a different one to make it seem like, wow, I don't frequent this one every day, sort of
Yep.
thing.
No,
Um,
I can relate to that, unfortunately, but yeah, and sometimes you'd be, oh, good, I'm glad it's a different cashier today. Or whatever. I mean, it's just amazing how, and some people are like, well, they don't care, they just want to sell alcohol, but that's how we feel. It's like that internal thing where
totally.
we are ashamed of it and are trying to hide it.
Right.
Yeah, that.
That, and even like paying for cash or paying with cash, so that my wife, when she's checking the bank statements and stuff, doesn't really see how much I'm actually spending on alcohol. And individually, that kind of stuff is probably bad enough, but you put all of them together, and again, in hindsight, it wasn't until looking back that I realized, man, those were some telltale signs that maybe this was getting out of control or a little out of hand, or that maybe I did have a problem. At the time, I could always justify it, like, oh man, you worked really hard today, or you had a tough day, like you deserve this, or this is your reward, or there's always a reason to drink if you're looking for one, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, and I think there's I don't know if you follow Austin Carr on his page, but he talks a lot about sobriety and uh, and when he always talked about the show, you had your show drink, and that was kind of
Right.
what you described. You got your show
Totally.
drink in front of everyone else, and then you sneak the extra is that people don't know about, and so you just kind of put on the show that you're just having one, but maybe you've had three. Sadly, that's just how it is. And one of the things I think you'll start to you might notice, because I think we talked. This is maybe uh, one of the first times you've been more open about, or I shouldn't say be open about it, but that you've really discussed this particular topic is um, is that a lot of people sometimes will reach out to you and they're like, nobody really knows I have this problem,
Right.
but I'm struggling with it. But they need
Right.
someone to talk to about it, and they don't know what to do, or what can I do to, what do you recommend? So that's and hopefully, and that's the goal, is really to help someone to feel that they have, maybe they can come clean, and maybe it helps somebody.
Yeah, totally. I know that personally, I've really benefited from having confidants that I could turn to, ask questions, get support from, and so on and so forth. Even I find just that shared experience, and I've made the mistake before of thinking like, I'm the only person that's ever experienced this, or, I'm a three-eyed weirdo for having this problem and that sort of thing. But the more that I am open about it, the more that I realize that others are experiencing some of the same things or have faced those challenges and learned better ways to overcome them. And so, yeah, I'll mention this at the end, but again, for anybody who's here or who's listening, if you want to talk more about it, or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out or shoot me a message or DM me personally, and happy to talk about it, and support you in any way that I can. I know for a fact that I would not be here today if it weren't for the support of other people who, had kind of walked that same path to sobriety, and that I could turn to in those moments. So,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Um, do you have a couple more questions here, Jacob? Are you in a hurry to
Sure.
get going?
Nope. Nope. We can keep going over.
Okay, right on. Well,
Yep.
I'm just curious, one of the things that I find that comes up for people often is this thought or this idea or this belief that, if they give up alcohol or if they quit drinking, they won't have any friends, or they wonder like, what are their friends or what are their family going to say, or that sort
Hmm.
of thing. there's some social stigma to that a little bit. And so I'm curious, what has your experience been like with that, or how has your relationships with friends or family changed since you got sober?
I think it's been very positive, because it's made me a better person. I feel like I'm working towards being a better person, being a better husband. I'm not perfect, but I'm working on it. Trying to be a better father, be a better friend. Um, as you mentioned, you had friends that supported you, and I'm very grateful for friends that have supported me, and family. And so I'm in a good place. Sometimes there has been, you know, I know one thing that can happen with sobriety is you might have to change who your friends that you hang out with. If they're not good influence, or they are, you know, heading down a path that you're going in a different direction now. And so that there's that. I've been fortunate. A lot of my friends have been supportive, and I'm in a real good place. Like, I have no interest in desire in drinking again, so I can be around it. Um, and so I think some have told me they've cut back or even quit after hearing my story. Um, um, do people maybe not invite me to certain functions because they know I'm sober, and there might be drinks there? It's very possibly could be, um, but I'm okay with it. I understand, because sometimes there is some, can be lonely at times, sobriety, especially when you are a minority in that. But um, but overall, I would say it's been, I've seen more positive than negative, and it just makes you really focus on trying to improve yourself, as because you really kind of work internally on things, and then it just carries over to so many other things in your life,
Yeah,
in your
I would
relationships.
agree. I would agree with that, and I'd echo that in the sense that, maybe in some cases, some friends dropped off and that sort of thing. Maybe my peer group got a little bit smaller, but more importantly, the relationships that I have and the relationship that I maintained improved drastically. And I think that in the past, if I've had highs and lows, those have, normalized, or at least they're a lot more, even keeled. And I'm a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm more patient. I'm more present. My emotions, my energy, my attitude are way more in check. And the relationships that I do have with friends and family are much deeper, much more genuine, and there's a much better connection. And some of the friends that maybe drifted off or dropped off, I feel like I wondered to myself sometimes, like, well, if that's all we had in common was the drinking and the, shooting pool at an Irish pub, like, were we really that good of friends to begin with? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that too.
right.
You know.
No, and
Well,
yeah, and I think that's where, um, I had to find, because I've become so educated in alcohol. Like, I kind of wanted to talk about it all the time. Like, I wanted to share what I was, and that not everybody wants to hear that all the time. So I've had to learn. It's been a learning process, adjusting to this new lifestyle. Um, and that's where my page allows me a space to do that. And if people want to reach out to me and talk to me about it, I'm here for them if they need it. But I try not to force it, and I certainly don't judge anybody who chooses to drink. I may have concerns if they're overdoing it, because I don't want them to go down the same path I went down. That would be just a concern I might, that I would have. But I don't judge anyone. I understand why, if somebody wants to have a drink, and I can have a soda or whatever, I'm fine with it. So
totally. Yeah. I feel the same way in the sense of being able to go out and be around it and that sort of thing, and not judging other people for wanting to do it, because, man, that was me, not all that long ago, and so I find that I'm just a lot happier and a lot healthier when I don't. And that's all I'm really concerned about at this point. And so
yeah,
out of curiosity, what are some of the best coping mechanisms that you found for maintaining sobriety, or how do you manage stress or deal with anxiety, or little simple acts or tips that you have to maintain your sobriety?
For me, I've had to stay real busy. I think it's important to stay busy because you have to kind of start creating new habits. And so if your habit used to be come home, make yourself a drink, make a drink for with dinner, you have to find different things. So maybe it's something else, a non-alcoholic beverage that you can drink. You know, Going to the gym has been huge for me. That's been kind of my other therapy, and um, I'm very motivated to get there every day that I can. I try to get there at least 3 times a week, and so that's really helped me to cope with stress because if I've had a stressful day, going to the gym and taking it out on the bench or taking it out on whatever it is, the weights, is a lot more healthy way to cope. There's been certain moments where I've had a really bad, stressful day, and I where in the past I would have probably turned to a drink right away, and now I might do some push-ups and say a prayer to to my God, and that's the way I cope with it. And those are you try to find healthy ways, and then just trying to stay busy, like working around the house, and that those you find things to do so that you have a substitute, I guess. That helps me cope.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but early on, I was crushing those non-alcoholics like they were going out of style. And they make some that are actually, like
Pretty
really
good.
good, and like,
Yeah.
some IPAs and some ales and some ones where the flavor is actually, pretty similar and that sort of thing. But, I was burning through those. I remember one time actually looking at this and being like, this is 0.5. I wonder how many of these I have to crush to get a buzz. But like that's the little like games that we play with ourselves. So
Yeah.
the things that kind of go through the mind of an addict, so to speak. And
Hmm.
but I don't drink those as much anymore. In fact, I'm on the same page as you as far as kind of like exercise. And
Hmm.
that gym has just been a huge blessing for me in the sense that I oftentimes say like exhaust the body or train the body to tame the mind.
Yep.
When I'm stressed or anxious or that monkey mind of mine is going off, at a million miles an hour, like if I can exhaust my body, it does wonders for changing the way that I think and changing the way that I feel. And oftentimes when I'm done, I just, I'm feeling way better and I don't even really, have to worry about that stress or the anxiety or don't want a drink anymore. But even simple things, man, like I would have never thought about, but one of my like, saving graces was going for walks,
Yep.
believe it or not, just getting outside and 2 feet in a heartbeat and just getting some steps in as far as kind of like that mental clarity and a little bit of a break. It does wonders for me. You find that too?
Yeah. Yeah. Going for a walk or a hike, or
Sure.
a lot of times in the past, I'd usually be like, ah, no, go, you go ahead, and my wife would maybe take the kids out, and I wouldn't do that, and it's like that's where you allow it to you allow something to take, like, it's more important. What's really more important? We know what's more important, and so you like the moments. I can actually feel present in the moments and appreciate them and enjoy the time. And in my case, because of how serious it got, you know, my I appreciate each moment um, that I get. And when I don't feel like going to the gym, I'd say no, I'm going anyways because I'm just lucky to be here to go to the gym, and I want to get healthy. I want to be healthy so that I can be here longer, and then also be a walking billboard in a sense of like the results that you're going to get if you choose this lifestyle.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, Aaron, great to have you, man.
Yeah, higher.
Yeah, it's funny what you said there about your wife would go for a walk with the family and you'd maybe hang back or stay back a little bit. I found that going back to what we were talking about earlier, that drinking started as a social thing for me. But the
Yep.
more that I did it, the more isolated I kind of became, and the more I'd start to kind of remove myself from those situations. And, I'd actually choose to drink home alone and not go out to social settings because for whatever reason, I didn't want other people to judge me for how much I was consuming, or I didn't want to, say something or do something dumb and that sort of thing. And in a lot of cases, kind of had that negative effect, or, that's what I mean is it kind of turned its back on me.
Yep. Yeah, because you had to kind of like control how much you drink, and so
Right.
because you didn't want people, to think that you were, you know, you're just having a couple, but at home you can have as many as you want. So,
Totally.
and so that, yeah, you do end up that unfortunately that's where it can take you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe just one or two more questions here, and then if
Yeah.
anybody has any other questions or any comments, feel free to ask away. Jacob has agreed graciously to field any questions from any of you guys. So if there's anything that comes to mind, questions or comments, feel free to either throw it in the chat or, like I said, raise your hand and we'll get to you in a moment here. But you mentioned a couple of resources there, Jacob. But what advice would you give, or what resources would you recommend to anybody who's either a little bit sober curious or looking to, explore what sobriety might look like for them?
If you're thinking about it, I would say, give it a try. For one, if you're somebody who's sober curious and that you don't really feel that you have a problem, like you can moderate well, try take a month off. Take then if after that month is went well, like try another month and then just see. And I think you'll see after if you stuck with it for like 6 months, you'd see so many benefits that you'd you might question whether you ever really have any interest in going back to it. Now, if you have a problem with it, now it might be some that to say going a month is a little daunting. So that's where you might say, let's not have a drink today,
Right.
and then get through that day, and then I'm not going to drink tomorrow, and take it a day by day. And if you have try your best to stay sober. If you have a relapse or if you do drink, it doesn't erase all your other days. Just pick it up the next day then. Um, but I would encourage you because I've seen, for one, if you have if it's gotten to the point where it's taken control of you, you're going to see some drastic changes when you go away from it. I mean, we're talking major. Um, is what my experience has just been life changing. But if you are someone who is just looking for a little edge at work, you want a little edge in your business to try to be a little more successful. Um, or if you are an athlete and you want to have the edge over the other athlete, if you cut out alcohol, you're taking away a toxin. You're taking away something that is really a poison. I mean, it's an ethanol, so it's like what you put in your gas tank. It's really not for your body. And so you take that away, you're going to get an edge from a performance standpoint. And um, so those are the two. I guess it just depends on where you're at with it, with alcohol and that sort of thing. But I would say give it a try because I'm telling you, it's been life changing, and I think, and as you've expressed as well, and this we're just two people. If you There's so many that I've talked to who have chosen this path and they have never regretted it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the more that I share with things like this, what I'm really trying to do too is, and maybe you as well, is trying to kind of normalize sobriety. And there's, other people like, superstar celebrities and A-list athletes who all talk about, sobriety and how oftentimes their careers just take off once they give up drinking, and how it wasn't until that point that they really achieved like that next level of success. And I find personally that like every single aspect of my life is improved. And my relationships, my health, my fitness, my sleep, my income, my business, I could just go on and on and on as far as my energy, my attitude, my mindset. And all of those, you're right, they do give you that little bit of an edge, whether it's personally or professionally or both. And you mentioned a book earlier that
Yep.
was, what was the name of the book again here?
This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. That one really helped me a lot. And there's another one, Alcohol Lied to Me.
Alcohol
I
Lied.
on my page I highlighted like my top three
Cool.
um, sober books that I've read that are. And if you don't like to read, like get Audible or something like that and listen to it. On a drive or something like that, and then you can still get the benefits.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Another book, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one, but there was one by a guy named Alan Carr, I think, and he wrote a book called How to Quit Smoking. And I
Yep.
think that he's also written one about how to quit drinking. And well, if I understand correctly, it's all about kind of like changing your perception, your beliefs around what alcohol really is and how it really influences and what effect it has on a human mind and a human body.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through that one,
Interesting.
and that's a really good one too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I might as well just mention this too, is that, I found a lot of support in AA. And as far as kind of like, just having that connection and that camaraderie and that sort of thing. But one of the things that people kept coming back to is this idea of like, just not today. I'm not going to have a drink today. And I didn't have to put any real big overarching, confines on it, or I'm never going to drink again. And I found that that was really helpful. And sometimes it wasn't even today. Sometimes it was like fucking hour to hour or minute to minute. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I'm just not going to drink this minute, And so that was really helpful. And so if anybody else is looking for any additional resources, Alan Carr's book has come highly recommended. And, A has been super helpful for me too. But like I said at the beginning, I think there are many different paths to sobriety. And I don't know if any one is any better than the other. I think it's a journey, you know, an individual type of journey. So,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely. Yep.
maybe I'll open it up to the crowd here. Does anybody have any questions or any comments, either for Jacob or myself, before we sign off and let you guys go?
Hey Matt, hey Jacob.
Yeah.
Kind of joining a
Hi.
little late, trying to make sure I had the time right, but so many things y'all was saying that was true. One thing that was important was y'all talked about like the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And even though I never had problems with drugs, but this also can turn to other things that people have bad habits of. And like I said, it really starts with our inner conversations. Like you said, okay, I'm going to hide this because I don't want people to judge me, but then I'm doing more of it. Well, this is not helping me. So, what would be like a way that you can say, how can you create space and awareness that okay, maybe it's time for me to reach out?
Yeah.
That's good. That's a very good question. You want to start, Matt? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it.
Yeah.
I found that even just, being able to be honest with myself and be introspective and try to reflect on some of my actions and my behaviors. And like we have said, I can get pretty good at kind of like selling myself on my own brand of bullshit and, lying to myself and making excuses and rationalizing and justifying poor behavior. But, when I realized and saw to what extent it was affecting my family and then those around me, it became pretty obvious that something had to change. And I knew that everything that I had tried up until that point wasn't working. And it finally got to the point where I kind of had to surrender, for a lack of a better term, and say, you know what, fuck, I give up. I don't know anymore. I've tried everything. What else is there? And that was the point for me where I realized that maybe this is something that I need help with.
Yeah, and I think that's, if you know where you could turn to, I think you're right on, Aaron, about those inner conversations. My inner conversations are so much different than when I was on really struggling with alcohol, because I didn't know really where to turn. I'm so clear-minded. I would say, who do I know that has dealt with this before that I could
Right.
go talk to for help? Who do I trust? And that's why why I've been so open about it, is because by being open about it, I've had so many people that I didn't even expect reach out to me privately, and I keep those conversations private when they do um, reach out to me, that they are struggling and they're looking for help. And and so um, so I would say, if you know somebody, go to them and try to ask them, what did they do. Ask them about their story, and how they got around it, and 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 then you may feel comfortable enough to, after hearing their story, open up to them about some of your struggles.
Yeah, great point there, Jacob. Yeah.
Thank you. Both great answers. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jacob. That was amazing. So thank you, and keep doing what y'all doing. And this conversation is really helping people and inspiring people.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that.
Right on. Any other questions here, gentlemen? Any other comments? Yeah, Troy. Well, you're still on mute here. Give me a second.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah, 7 years sober. Um,
Good for you.
what was
That's right.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, for me too. I didn't go to any AA or anything. I was scared to death as well. With with just one day I woke up, it was after a night of not even heavy drinking. I only had maybe 3 or 4 drinks, but I woke up feeling like I was drinking all weekend. It was horrible. So I just said no more. So I quit drinking and smoking the same day, and I haven't looked back. And and I know I'll never go back. I just don't want to feel that way anymore. And
Yeah.
for me, it felt really easy to do because I was just scared. And
Okay.
so, so yeah, but I know it's a lot. Everyone has a different story, affects everybody differently. But mine was very similar to yours, but I didn't have a jaundice or anything, liver disease, but
Yeah.
I was on that path. I know if I would have kept drinking, I would be dead by now.
Really. Okay. Sure. Well,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, the fact that 7 years, that's really impressive. So first off, congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, for you to have the willpower to do it, you know, that's the ideal situation that was it a struggle at first, or you were able to just kind of,
Well, I lost, you lose all your friends, right? Well, your so-called friends. Uh,
yeah,
that was the kind of hard part. But the actual craving for it or anything, maybe for the first couple of weeks, I was going through withdrawals, but after that, I just never looked back again. But I still, like, say, if I do go out, I'll drink a non-alcohol beer. So that's kind of
okay,
my crutch.
yeah,
I'll have that, but yeah, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be.
sure. Do people
But
ask you about, like, why you don't drink, or like, when, or is
oh
it,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. They want to know. Lately, I've been hearing this on social media, like people wanting to know why, like, did something really bad happen or anything? And this one guy said, "No, I just don't like putting poison into my body."
yeah,
I said you choose
sure,
not to do it. I didn't kill nobody. I didn't hurt nobody. I did decide one day I just didn't want to feel like this anymore, and that was it. And for the first 5 years, I had no real anyone to talk to until I started working with Matt. And then we started talking about it, and me and him are very, very similar when it came to drinking. And so that's where I kind of got my first real support, that's like someone to talk to.
That's good. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
important. It's really important to have a place that you can, for sure, that you can talk to, because it's I can't imagine going 5 years like if you went without having that support. It
Yeah, like best friend. I to this day I still go meet him for drinks, and he's not as bad as he used to be. But he always said, "Oh, you'll never make it," because it wasn't my first attempt,
Okay.
and the first time was like a year and a half, and then I fell off the wagon. And so he was always joking, but deep down inside he knew he didn't think I could do it. But so I proved him wrong.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Well,
great.
Troy, congrats, man, on 7 years. You know, you're inspiring people whether you realize it or not, dude. And so good on you because you know, that's not for the faint of heart, I'll say. You know,
Hmm.
but to your
They fly
point
by.
there, about, you know, like when people ask, you know, how come, did something really bad happen, you know, that sort of thing. I think there's kind of a misconception, you know, the only reason why people don't drink is because something terrible has happened. And I feel like, you know, everybody's rock bottom is a little bit different, and you don't
Mhm.
necessarily need to, you know, have had a series of DUIs or been arrested or things like that to decide to make a change or to improve
The
yourself or your
potential is
life.
there for sure.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that sometimes that comparison can almost be a bit of a trap because I found that, like, you know, I still had my family, I still had my business, didn't get any DUIs, I wasn't, you know, being arrested or getting kicked out of clubs, and you know, it's easy to be like, well, you know, I'm not that bad, I don't need to change. You know, but if I was being real honest with myself, I realized that, yeah, actually, you know what, I'm just a lot better off without it. And you know, anybody can make that decision at any point if they want to, you know.
And I did go through those stages in my life when my early 20s. Like I lost my license, a DUI, um, arrested, well, like drunk tank, that kind of stuff. But then there was a period where then I grew up, but so it's more of a responsible alcoholic, you
Mm,
know,
right,
I wasn't rowdy no more and stuff. I took it easy,
right.
but that's not a reason either to
Right.
keep drinking anyway.
Sure.
Well, and they say that um, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and to be sober in a world that is totally obsessed with alcohol is you can do anything. So again, just kind of like to your 7 years. I mean, that's impressive. So way to go.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I think that tide is shifting a little bit though, with the help of people like Jacob who are normalizing it and who are talking about it and are making it more accessible and easier to access that kind of information. You know, I think more and more people are realizing that, you know, hey, there are benefits to going sober. And I know that there's a number of different, you know, non-alcoholic lines of products and places where people can go to for support and that sort of thing too. So I think we're starting to experience somewhat of a shift there. I hope,
Well,
anyway.
this generation of like my kids, they're growing up, like my kids don't want to drink. They saw what it did to me. I told stories of how it, like what happened to their grandfather for drinking. So they don't want that. And then accessibility now, the information's all there. Like when I was in high school, it was just maybe a guy would come to school and talk about it once,
Okay.
or something. Now it's
Mhm.
everywhere.
Right.
I was checking out at the other day at the store, and they're selling cigarettes there, and they had the big sign from the that has to be placed there that tells you all the that this can cause cancer and all the bad things. And yet nowhere on an alcohol bottle does it say anything about that. The only thing they always say is drink responsibly. That's pretty much
Right.
all you really hear. They don't say that it's a type 1 carcinogen that can cause 7 types of cancer, um, and all the negative. And so I really, I don't know how we get the word out there. I think there are some people working on it, but it really should be on the bottles of alcohol. There should be something
Yeah.
that says that, because that's, I mean, otherwise it's misleading. People don't realize. I mean, they. I guess you can say, well, people know alcohol is not good for you, but they don't maybe realize how bad it is when it's so glamorized and
Well, they show
normalized.
like on the cigarette packs, like lung cancer or throat
Right.
cancer, just some disgusting pictures. You never see that with alcohol. It's always a
No.
beautiful person or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice car.
Enjoying a beach setting or something. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's important. I think people talk about how smoking was, they show some of the advertisements of smoking like way back when.
Over the years.
And I think they said, alcohol is probably the next smoking, and if down the road, people are going to be, if more and more young people are needing livers and getting sick and dying very young. I mean, it can reduce your age by 20 years, or um, that's a lot of years that you gave up. Is it worth it?
Right.
Not, definitely not. I mean, but
Well, I was just about to say that it wouldn't surprise me in the least if that was to come as far as like the marketing and the advertising. And in a few years from now, we'll probably look back and we'll see alcohol as the same way that we look at smoking cigarettes now. And back in the day, and cigarettes were in all the movies and all the TV shows, and it was normalized and glamorized and that sort of thing. And I see a day where we look back and alcohol is kind of like the same thing, where people have shifted, and it's not given that same sort of accolades. But
I hope so.
yeah, yeah. Well, hey, last kind of thought here, and I'll let you guys run, but I just want to say thank you again, Jacob, for being here specifically, but also for doing what you're doing, man. And you're inspiring thousands of people, and you're contributing to that shift that we're experiencing, and you're having a ripple effect on everybody and those around you. So keep doing what you're doing, man, and thank you. And I certainly appreciate you, your insights, and your willingness to kind of open up and share, be honest, and just kind of share some of your experiences. So thanks, Jacob.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me, and I think what you're doing too with your platform is great too, and trying to help people be successful in life. And I think that's really important, because you give a place for, as Troy just mentioned, you gave him a place that he could go to. So that's really important.
Right on, man. Well, thanks so much, and thanks everybody for being here. I hope
You
that
gonna
you
leave the links,
guys,
Matt?
what's that, sorry?
You gonna leave the links for his social media somewhere?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Just as a little reminder, though, you can find him at feel underscore sober underscore good on Instagram. But I'll share a couple of links too. So right on. Thanks, gentlemen. I hope you guys, yeah, there we go. Thanks, Jacob. I hope you guys found some value in that, and maybe took away one or two little tidbits of information, or maybe at the very least a little inspiration. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and look forward to talking with you guys soon. Take care,
Yep.
everybody.
Yep. Take care. Thanks, Matt.
Bye
Bet.
bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jacob.
guys.
Right on. Hey, that was awesome. Thanks, Jacob.